Imagine this: your country owes trillions of dollars in debt, and one day the government announces it simply can't pay it back. What happens next? How does this affect your savings, your job, your daily lives, and even the world economy? Welcome back to the AdCap Show, where today we are diving into one of the most dramatic events that can shake an entire nation: sovereign default. So, you have probably heard of countries defaulting on their debt: Greece, Argentina, Venezuela, just to name a few. But what does it actually mean for a country to default? And why should it matter to you? Well, buckle up, because we are going deep into the world of sovereign debt, and trust me, it's more complicated and more impactful than you might think. Sovereign default happens when a country fails to meet its debt obligations. In simple terms, it means a country cannot or will not pay back the money it owes to creditors. And these creditors could be anyone: foreign governments, international financial institutions like IMF, private banks, or even countries' own citizens who hold government bonds. So why does a country default? Well, countries borrow money, just like individuals or businesses do, to fund their operations. Government borrow money for everything: social programs, infrastructure, education, defense, and more. But sometimes they borrow more than they can ever hope to repay. Think about it this way: a country has a budget just like a household. If you keep borrowing money to pay for living expenses, sooner or later you hit a breaking point. For government, this breaking point often comes when a debt load becomes so large that they can't service interest payments, let alone pay back the principal. Let's say the government officially defaults. What happens next? First, panic sets in. The country's currency will likely plummet as investors scramble to get rid of their holdings. This is known as currency depreciation. When a government defaults on its debts, foreign investors lose confidence in country's economy, and as a result, they start pulling their money out. Take Argentina for example. In 2001, Argentina defaulted on nearly $100 billion in debt. This move triggered a severe devaluation of the peso. The result? Inflation skyrocketed, unemployment spiked, and poverty rates reached record highs. People saw their savings evaporate almost overnight. Inflation often goes through the roof because, with the currency devaluing so quickly, the cost of imported goods become unaffordable. And guess what? Things like food, medicine, gasoline, the basics, becomes luxurious. But what does this mean for regular people? Well, it's not just about higher prices. A default can destroy entire livelihoods. Government often respond to debt crisis with austerity measures: cutting government spendings, slashing social programs, and raising taxes. For ordinary citizens, this can feel like a punch in the gut. Let's take Greece as an example. In 2012, Greece's debt crisis came to a head. The government's response? Severe cuts to pensions, public services, and wages. The economy contracted for years and unemployment hit sky-high levels, especially among young people. It wasn't just numbers on a spreadsheet, it was a real hardship for millions. Now, a sovereign default doesn't just affect the country in question, it has a ripple effect. Remember, most governments borrow money from foreign investors. When a country defaults, these creditors, often big financial institutions, hedge funds, and foreign governments, don't just sit idly by. These creditors can suffer huge losses, which in turn affects the global financial markets. When country defaults, it can trigger a contagion effect, where investors start pulling their money from other economies, fearing that they too might default. This can create a domino effect that causes financial crisis in other countries, especially those with high debt levels or similar economic problems. So, what happens when a country defaults? Does it just go bankrupt and disappears from the map? Not exactly. The International Monetary Fund (IMF) often steps in to help. But here's the catch: they don't just hand over money without strings attached. Instead, the IMF and other international financial institutions might offer the country a bailout, but only if they agree to make tough economic reforms. These reforms are known as conditionalities. And what do these reforms usually look like? Well, they often involve austerity measures, cut to public spending, privatization of state-owned assets, and tax hikes. These measures are highly controversial. In Greece, for example, the austerity measures imposed by IMF sparked massive protests, political instability, and severe public backlash. Let's be clear, the road to recovery after default is long and painful. Even after restructuring and receiving international assistance, it can take decades for country to regain financial stability and investors' confidence. Argentina, for instance, took 15 years after its default in 2001 to fully resolve its debt issues and return on international credit markets. During this time, the country faces years of sluggish growth, high unemployment, and social instability. People continue to suffer from the aftermath of a default for years, sometimes even generations. A default also causes severe political instability. When the economy takes a nosedive, people lose faith in their leaders. Public anger can lead to regime change, as we saw in Argentina, where mass protests led to the resignation of the president in 2001. Political volatility is often a direct consequence of a default, as citizens demand accountability for the mismanagement of countries' finances. But here's the silver lining: countries can and do recover from defaults. After a period of economic hardship and political upheaval, nations often find a path forward. A key to recovery is political stability, economic reforms, and most importantly, a willingness to rebuild trust with international creditors. So, what happens when a country defaults on its debts? It's not just about missed payments. It's a seismic event that affects everyone: the people, the economy, and the global financial system. While recovery is possible, it's a long and painful journey. And as we have seen from countries like Greece, Argentina, and Venezuela, the consequences of default are far reaching, impacting every aspect of daily lives, from your wallet to your political freedoms. That's all for today. If you found this video insightful, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the complex world of global finance. And as always, drop your thoughts or questions in comments below. I would love to hear your take on sovereign defaults. See you next time.